Hello everyone and welcome to Pyanodons Mods. This is Otaku Showboat, and in this tutorial I'll be going over the phosphate processing. As per usual, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help make this tutorial series visible higher up in search results. You can also follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/OtakuShowboat, follow me on Twitter at OtakuShowboat, and visit my website at otakushowboat.com. You can help to support my continued existence and the production of these tutorials by becoming a patron on Patreon at patreon.com/OtakuShowboat. You can also help support Pyanodons Mods development at patreon.com/Pyanodon. As a disclaimer, Pyanodons Mods are in a constant state of flux, so any numbers I present may change. The mods for this particular file are nearly identical to my stream save, the list of which mods is linked below this video on my stream schedule page. The only difference is that I am using the Infinity mod to help to showcase the various processing chains. So with that said, let's get started with our phosphate processing chain. So, phosphate, when you first need to obtain phosphate, can only be mined. You will only mine it at the point in the game when you start needing phosphoric acid. When do you start needing phosphoric acid? Well, about the time that you want to start making molten aluminium is when you should start thinking about getting phosphoric acid, because you will need phosphoric acid to make your pulp 1 for your aluminium chain. So that is around the time where you will start to get phosphoric acid if you are choosing to go the molten aluminium route, which I do highly suggest, so that you can do the molten aluminium and copper duralumin recipe. That is very important. So timing-wise, we're talking about post-green science. Post-green science is where we will start thinking about setting up our phosphate rock processing into phosphoric acid. You will also need phosphoric acid for your circuit 2 chain. Now, you do need aluminium pulp 1 in your circuit 2 chain. You will also need phosphoric acid in the production of etching solution. So bear in mind that those are two items that you will need phosphoric acid for. So here I will be covering pretty much everything that you can do, basically everything that you can do with your phosphate rocks all across the game, because there you will be using a lot of it even going forward later on into your Circuit 3s and your Mark III production in particular. So let's get started here with our processing chain. Now, the rocks themselves, besides being processed going forward into phosphoric acid, the rocks themselves do have their own purposes, their own uses. We've got phosphorus pentasulfide that can be made out of rocks and sulfur. They will produce a little bit of pyrite. I know that the last time I talked about this in a tutorial, there was someone who was quite adamant about me not pointing out that the pyrite that is made here can feed into the other recipe for phosphate rocks that takes in pyrite and makes iron ore out of it as a byproduct. So yeah, that's a thing you can do. It's about 10-to-1 ratio. 10-to-1 on the pyrite here at the moment. So that's without the use of productivity modules. You can productivity module this. Now, what is the phosphorus pentasulfide used for? So, phosphorus... Actually, I need to look for pen. Is it even going to be in my list easily? No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of these. I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to hit Control F, and that's going to find it for me. Excuse me, Control F, and pull that out. Phosphorus pentasulfide is used exclusively in the production of Aerofloat 15. Exclusively in the production of Aerofloat 15. You need Aerofloat 15 in the production of high chromite. So in your chromium chain, in your zinc chain, and in your nickel chain. So only in more advanced processing of chromium, zinc, and nickel will you need Aerofloat 15, and will you need your pentasulfide. So that is the pentasulfide. You will also need rocks to feed into phosphate glass. Phosphate glass is used in various Mark III equipment, as well as items that are involved in the Circuit 3 chain, as well as space science. So, you know, just you need a bit for space science, and you need a bit for the Circuit Board 3 chain as well. So definitely bear all this in mind. You are going to need this for Circuit 3s as well as Mark III equipment. So while not an immediate need, and it also needs iron oxide, crushed quartz, sodium sulfate, and acetylene. I mean, this is just me looking at this recipe without any outside consideration. I haven't even made this recipe yet in a playthrough. I haven't gotten that far on my own personal playthroughs yet. Looking at this recipe, this is simple. My mind is immediately thinking about how I get all of this stuff. Because you can classify, use a classifier on sand to make gravel, crushed quartz, and iron oxide. It is a gravel recipe to classify sand. That also gives you crushed quartz and iron oxide. Well, this recipe uses crushed quartz and iron oxide. It is a great recipe to use to feed into this. So already I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to be able to send some of the gravel byproducts that I'm currently using to get gravel primarily. I can use these byproducts now with this recipe for the phosphate glass. Sodium sulfate, I have a setup for already that involves doing the slacked limestone loop to get sodium hydroxide to feed into sodium sulfate. So that I've gotten accounted for. You probably, by the point in the game where you're thinking about this, already have setups for sodium sulfate. And then acetylene is acetylene, and acetylene is tholins, basically. Or, you know, if you're at the point where you can easily set up a whole bunch of coke, basically from water, then you're fine. You can just use your massive amounts of coke and limestone to make your acetylene, and limestone from water to make your acetylene. So this is fine. I am okay with this recipe as it stands, in the amounts of stuff that it uses as it stands, although note that it's 0.75 output on a Mark II foundry for like 9 oxide in. Alright. And then the last thing that the actual rocks get used for is, of course, glorious stainless steel, molten stainless steel, will need your phosphate rocks, as well as a whole bunch of other things. Niobium plates, sulfur, copper. Chances are you have most of this by the time you're thinking of setting up stainless steel. Remember that you're going to need stainless steel in the Circuit 2 production line, and you're definitely going to need it as a raw resource for your blue science anyway. You need it in the Circuit 2 chain just to build a specific building as part of the Circuit 2 chain that will require stainless steel. Oddly enough. That'll be the only time you actually use stainless steel in the Circuit 2 chain, is just to build a building that is involved in the Circuit 2 chain. But you'll need it anyway for making blue science. This is why I constantly say, if you have Circuit 2s, you have blue science, because in order to get your Circuit 2s, you've already set up everything else that feeds into blue science. So it's just logistics, not adding anything new. You already have everything that you need for blue science as soon as you finish setting up your Circuit 2s. But yeah, this is the last thing that takes phosphate rocks, and it is not an insignificant amount of phosphate rocks, and as with all ore processing of the primary ore types that are added in Pyraw ores, you cannot do productivity module here. I think that you can on phosphate glass, and you absolutely can on the phosphorous pentasulfides. So, lots of things need flat-out rocks. The first step along our path to phosphoric acid is to crush it in a jaw crusher. Crushing rocks in a jaw crusher. Specifically 8 Mark I jaw crushers if you're throwing a 15 per seconds of rocks at it, or the output of about 4 phosphate machines. This says 32, bear in mind it's a mining time of 200%, which means that you have this value. And the yellow belt is limited to 15 per second. So, you get these, it gets a moving. I don't know why this is, like, dead on me. Oh, right, that would explain things. There we go. Now this will, like, move, because it will void acid there, but whatever. Crushing it produces powdered phosphate rocks. Now, powdered phosphate rocks get used in myoglobin. Ooh, what is myoglobin? Well, myoglobin is used in this stuff called paramagnetic material made in particle accelerators. And this is a component used in various Mark III things. Going to make clear note of the high-tech robots, T3 bots, as well as things that are used in utility science and space science. These two for space. This oscillator is used in utility. Optical parametric oscillator is used in utility, and then these other two in space. So you're going to need a lot of it for science. So definitely bear that in mind. You're going to need a good supply of myoglobin. For robots, huge demand to upgrade your bots will be pulling on this myoglobin. Now, as for the other things involved in making the myoglobin besides the powdered rocks, bear in mind that the powdered is half out compared to the rocks in. So think of one of these machines without modules as being essentially 5 rocks in equivalent to half a myoglobin out per second. And then you, of course, have urea, which is basically free, as well as meat, which that's Zapier processing. Chances are by the time you're thinking about Mark III stuff, you already have Zapier processing to make collagen. So you are probably already trying to deal with an overabundance of meat. So you can use your excess amounts of meat in here making myoglobin, and then cyanic acid will come from urea, basically, as the easy way of getting cyanic. So everything else I consider, like, pretty simple as well. This is not that difficult of a recipe to do in larger amounts as well. So the powdered phosphate rock will then be converted by adding syngas. Oh, that's the other thing I didn't mention. Mining the phosphate rocks requires syngas and drill heads. You don't need to provide power to the system besides to the inserters pulling in the drill heads. But yeah, it will consume drill heads, so bear that in mind. Consuming drill heads here. Drill heads are iron, steel, and chromium, as well as syngas. Now, you take your powdered and you convert it into phosphorous acid. This is a very specific product. It is phosphorous acid. It is not phosphoric acid or phosphine. You will need to throw a not insignificant amount of pure sand, not sand, but pure sand at it. So definitely bear that in mind. This is not an insignificant amount in terms of the amount of space that it requires to make this much pure sand. But it's going to be a lot of sand, and then you have to throw ash at it. Now ash is ubiquitous. A lot of stuff produces ash, and you can even like you'll have so much ash you won't know what to do with it all. Uh, Filter flue gas if you really need a lot of ash. You should have lots of ash, lots of ash. Like that, there's no real there's no real setup to produce just ash that you will necessarily need to get enough ash to feed everything. You can do that, but your byproducts in this one limited circumstance with ash, this is the one time I'll say use your byproduct ash. Use your byproduct flue gas to get your ash, just because it is so ubiquitous. It's sort of like tailings, even though I void tailings. Voiding fluids is a lot easier than voiding solids, so you can save yourself some effort. Just gather up all the various processes you're doing by this point that are producing ash and or producing flue gas that you can filter into ash and use that. And then, of course, you need to feed syngas in. And that'll give you phosphorous acid. Now, phosphorous acid is used in Z3 reagent. Z3 reagent is used in pyro ores processing. So Z3 reagent is used exclusively for the lead processing chain. Exclusively in the lead processing chain. In 2 spots in the lead processing chain. That is the only thing you need the phosphorous acid for as it is, without converting it into either phosphine or into phosphoric acid. And it will need carbonyl sulfide in and methanol, and you can refer to my lead processing video about my thoughts on getting all of that. Phosphine from phosphorous acid. It produces both phosphine and phosphoric acid, so do bear that in mind, and both of these have uses. You will need to throw a lot of wood at this problem. A lot of wood needs to be thrown at this. This will be the point in the game where you will need to scale your wood production by a lot. If you haven't scaled your wood production by this point for this process, you're going to have to now. So this is your reminder that you must scale wood production when you set this up. Like this is the timing on when you need to scale wood. The amount of steam used is relatively insignificant. It's just a few boilers. Just a few boilers. Like 6. Like 4. 4 boilers. They produce 60 each. Now, what does phosphine get used for? We'll get back to this thing in a second. Phosphine gas gets used in your Circuit 2 production through the power of your light and doped silicon. This will need silicon wafers, phosphine, and etching solution. So this is where this is one of those things you're going to need a fair amount of in your Circuit 2 chain. So here is phosphine in Circuit 2s. So you are going to need phosphine as it is so don't convert all of it into phosphoric acid. In fact, I would say put it into a tank and then stick it behind a overflow valve. Overflow valve convert it into more phosphoric acid is how I would do it. And then lastly, for phosphine, we've got quantum dots. Oh, glorious quantum dots using colloidal silicon wafers, boric acid, and our good friend, the etching solution. Now, quantum dots are used in space science and Mark IV stuff, and the other recipe that produces a whole bunch of other science packs except for utility. in the quantum computer. So, quantum dots, Mark IV stuff plus space science, basically. So, really late game. Really late game. It's a really slow recipe, too. Like, by the time you get access to it, you will have level 3 modules. And beacons, too, for that matter. Does not take productivity in this recipe. So, definitely bear all of that in mind. The complexity here, by the way, comes from the colloidal silica requirement. This recipe. Let's get back to this recipe. So there are two ways of converting phosphine gas into phosphoric acid. This way, in this high-pressure furnace, converts, as you can see here, 50 units of phosphine into 40 units of phosphoric. So it's 50 to 40. This recipe, by adding saline water, converts 5 to 15. So you get 3 times as much phosphoric acid out as you do phosphine gas in by throwing saline water into the mix. This is why I would highly suggest doing this recipe to convert your phosphine into phosphoric acid. But that, of course, also means that you need the infrastructure for producing your saline water, and depending on how you're doing that, it may or may not need a lot of space. So do bear that in mind. You will also get out of this a wonderful supply of hydrochloric acid, or not hydrochloric acid, but HCl, hydrogen chloride. Hydrogen chloride, not hydrochloric acid. I always mix up those names, don't worry about it. HCl. What's interesting here is that this HCl will avoid lamps, so it ends up being a really nice way to get HCl, and you cannot use productivity on this recipe. You also get a little bit of oxygen, but it's just oxygen. Don't, void the oxygen and use the HCl if you really can, because that is a not insignificant amount of output for what you're putting into this, but it is a not insignificant amount of saline water, so definitely bear that in mind. Now, phosphoric acid. What is the phosphoric acid used in? Well, as I've already mentioned, it is used in aluminium pulp 1 and etching solution. So, we've already sort of talked about this. The etching solution will also need a lard and sulfuric acid and hydrogen peroxide to produce your etching solution. This will be used in various steps along the way of the circuit 2 chain. You will need quite a fair amount of it. You only need a little bit of the pulp 1 in one of the final steps of the circuit 2 chain. It's like just a check, really, to see that you have made pulp 1, that you have done aluminium processing to molten, basically. I think it just purely exists as a check for that. It might need, realistically, for that one specific component, it might need a bit of fluidic aluminium in the actual production of it in real life, but for gameplay reasons, I think it's just more of a check that you've set up molten aluminium going into your circuit 2s. It is also used in cumene. Now, this is the other thing that you may have decided to make first. You may have decided to do this first, and the reason why I say this is because it is involved in a phenol recipe, specifically the recipe that gives you phenol and acetone. I would not, personally having done exactly this on my first playthrough of the game, I would not have done this. I would not have gotten phenol in this recipe, this cumene phenol. So, cumene phenol gives you acetone. Acetone is so much easier to get just through doing tholins. This is literally the only method of getting acetone outside of tholins, is out of cumene. And I guess out of black liquor, but good luck getting sufficient amounts of black liquor. The only process that gives you black liquor is fiberboard. This recipe only exists as a means of being able to just do something with your byproduct black liquor. But the cumene is the only primary acetone outside of tholins, and you're always going to get phenol out of it. The problem here is that, well, what are you using the phenol for? Nylon and bakelite are the two primary reasons, because both of these are your circuit 2 chain. Bisphenol A is used in epoxy later. Xylenol, of course, could happen before your circuit 2s. Actually, no, it won't happen in your circuit 2s, because Xylenol is used exclusively in a post-circuit 2 processing. Same with cresilic acid, or cresilic, I think, is how you say that. In the Aerofloat 15 and the zinc pulp 1, I think all of this happens, quote-unquote, after circuit 2s, like at your high-grade processing level of stuff. So really, nylon and bakelite is the first thing that you'll see phenol for. Just do coal infiltration. Like, just do coal infiltration as your primary phenol. This is so much easier than going the route of cumene. And I would actually just say probably skip cumene entirely. It's only used in this to get primary source of acetone. You have much better ways of getting of using phosphoric acid. Like, phosphoric acid is incredibly expensive. Don't waste it on this. Phosphoric acid has a very low numerical output for the input expenditure of rocks. That's why this recipe is so great, because it, even just that little bit extra, plus this 40, remember, these numbers aren't exact, because it's like assuming a 16 input, not a... Well, it's assuming the 7.5, which is the 15, but whatever. 75 rather than 80. 75 rather than 80, so this is a little bit off, but yeah, like a little bit under 100 per second for a 15 per second phosphate rock in is... Yeah, I call that expensive for phosphoric acid, and yeah, you don't do this. Like, don't do that. Then the last thing that it gets used for is graphene rolls. Graphene rolls are used in some Mark III stuff, some Mark IV stuff, Circuit 3s, Circuit 4s, utility science, and space science, and other Mark IV stuff, and yeah, utility, probably like fusion energy stuff as well, high flux cores for inductor 3s, for circuit 3s, yeah, so it gets used in quite a bit of circuit 3 and 4 stuff later on. So this will be another decent draw, but it can be productivity moduled, which is fortunate. You will need graphene sheets and biofilm for this. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this particular video, as we hit like over half an hour for this video, I want to talk a bit about this recipe. This recipe, since the last time I've talked about it, has been modified. Now it is a 1-to-1 on collagen to rocks. So it is now 4 collagen in, 4 rocks out. It is now 10 phosphoric acid out as well. So this is your biotic means of getting phosphate rocks. This is your only biotic means of getting phosphate rocks, and it gives you a little bit of the phosphoric acid as well. Just a tiny bit of the phosphoric acid as well. You can productivity this. In fact, I would highly suggest productivitying this. By the time you get access to this building, though, is around the time where you're going to be starting to make your Circuit 3 stuff, so maybe you'll have access to more than just the level 1 productivity module. It all depends on the timing of things and when you want to think about setting this up. I would probably say wait until after getting your Circuit 3s to do this, but this is the only way that currently exists to get phosphate rocks from water, basically. This is the only way to dodge mining phosphate rocks. The issue is, in the current state of the game, before Pi Alien Life, it's really, 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 really hard to get collagen at scale from water. The setup is absolutely gigantic, and it stems primarily from, honestly, the Zipure artificial reefs being both slow and resource hungry. That is the main point that makes it incredibly inefficient / a really big overall footprint, is because the Zipure is slow, really slow per building, and it's resource hungry. So collagen ends up being very expensive to make as it is, and with it being 1-to-1, let's just say that my current setup on my current map could only make 10 per second on collagen, and that's with 180 Zipure artificial reefs, each with a level 1 speed module in them, because you can only do one module in a Zipure artificial reef. So yeah, it's not good. It's not good. I mean, even with the buff to this recipe, and just thinking about the amounts of phosphate rocks you're going to need a lot of phosphate rocks, a lot more than even 15 per second in, for all of the stuff that you're using the phosphoric acid for. So this is just one of those times where I have to say, this still isn't good. This still isn't good enough, even at my suggested buff to it to make it 1-to-1 collagen. I know I said that if it was reduced down to 3 or 4, that it would be a lot better, but better, yeah, but is it worth it at that even? Probably not. Probably not. So you're going to not, I would say, avoid this recipe like the plague. There is there are many other things that you will need to feed into your later game stuff that will require collagen. I'm thinking in particular Purple Science has items that will consume collagen. So use your collagen on the things that you know you need for your science production, and bite the bullet and mine the phosphate. Just mine the phosphate. I don't like saying that, because I prefer doing things from water when possible without having to mine things, but this is one of those circumstances. With this and with rare earth, mine it. Between this and rare earth, and I guess also with regulites, mine it. At least diamonds has a decent alternative, so I can tell you when we do diamonds, when we do cover diamonds, when we do cover diamonds eventually, cough cough, I can at least say, hey, there is an alternative to this, but that is viable with the particle acceleration for diamonds. But this, yeah, no. And how would I improve this? Oh God, I don't even know. You would have to like. At what point would I be willing to spend the collagen? Well, there's two options here. One is, you know, so Pyanodon watches these tutorials, does take things into consideration that I mentioned. This is not the first time I've talked about this, but fix collagen. Like, gosh, I literally have said to him, so on Patreon for Pyanodon, at the $10 level, he said that he will consider adjustments. Now, I am not at the $10 level, but I specifically said in one of my streams I had considered joining at the $10 level and just telling him one word. Collagen. Because at the time I was setting up that whole 180 Zipure Reef setup to feed collagen production. So collagen will change with alien life. / skin production for collagen will change in Pi Alien Life. You will have recipes that will give you just skin. And I'm going to make the assumption that they will be better recipes on the output of skin and faster recipes on the output of skin. So collagen production will improve with Pi Alien Life. There will very likely be alternative methods. In fact, I'm pretty much going to say that there will be alternative methods on top of that of getting bio-based phosphates. But in the interim, anyone who's currently playing a game of Pyanodons mods without Alien Life, because when Alien Life releases, you're going to have to start new games, new playthroughs when that happens. If you want to play with Pi Alien Life, it will not be compatible with existing save games. That does nothing with regards to existing save games, which is why I'm going to continue to say, please adjust the collagen chain. Please, like, give some extra recipes to Zipure so that you can get Zipure faster somehow. Preferably a recipe that uses less stone wool, but something else that I can make that is a better footprint than stone wool. Like, please adjust. Please adjust Zipure in particular. And, like, please put just give everyone the tech that lets you specifically choose what you want out of Zipure rendering. Like, please, I would like to render the Zipure into just skin, just meat, just bones, and just blood. Like, that would be great if you could give that something that actually, and then get more of any one than what you get if you do all of it together. That would be great. That would be fantastic. Like, that would help. That would help. It's not a perfect solution, but it would help. So anyway, that's my rant on this topic here to end off the video. With that, I would of course like to thank you all for watching. That covers our discussion of the phosphate chain and all of that good stuff and what you can use the various bits and bobs for. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you can help to keep these videos higher up in search results. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/OtakuShowboat. Follow me on Twitter at OtakuShowboat. Visit my website at otakushowboat.com. And if you would like to help support my continued existence and the development of these tutorials, you can become a patron on Patreon at patreon.com/OtakuShowboat. That would also help to keep the website ad-free. Just going to point that out as well. Now that we have met the goal with which I could remove the ads have been removed and will stay removed for as long as we are above that monthly goal. So be sure to head on over there if you would like to keep that going. Make certain that that is staying that way into the far future. And don't forget that you can also help to support Pyanodon and the Pyanodons mods development at patreon.com/Pyanodon, where you will also be able to get all of the latest updates to Pi Alien Life. News updates to Pi Alien Life. With that, the next tutorial. What is the next tutorial? What is the next tutorial? The next tutorial will be Nexalit. That is going to be our next tutorial. Nexalit! Yay! Finally, Nexalit, where we get to cover exactly what the heck you should do with all of those tailings that you've been accruing from all of the various different processes. Yeah, Nexalit. It is. Here's your preview of Nexalit. It can become a beast. It can become a beast. Yeah. But you're going to need... But this is a convenient discussion because the Nexalit will... The demand will scale the later in the game that you get, so it's very convenient that you get better and better efficiency out of your Nexalit as you go along as well. So it really, you have nice driving forces to push you to doing the more advanced processing of Nexalit. So we'll talk all about that in our next tutorial. I will see you all then.